January 1942. Before dawn. Detroit, Michigan. The river lies frozen beneath a pale sky, its surface cracked like old glass. Inside the Detroit Arsenal tank plant, night has no authority. Light floods the factory floor without pause, reflecting off bare steel and fresh welds. Presses strike armor plate with the force of small earthquakes. The smell of oil and hot metal clings to the air. A hull is lowered into place, its edges still warm, its seams unfinished. The line moves forward. It does not slow. It does not wait. Outside, snow gathers quietly along the roads, undisturbed by traffic that has already surrendered to the factory's rhythm. Inside, thousands of hands repeat the same motions they learned weeks earlier. Many have never held a rifle. Fewer still have seen a battlefield. Yet here, in this enclosed space, the future shape of war is being assembled piece by piece. At the same moment, across the Atlantic, German officers sit in heated rooms far removed from snow and factories. They lean over maps pinned with coloured flags. They review intelligence summaries and production estimates with the detached confidence of professionals who believe they understand the nature of war. When American figures appear, monthly outputs, factory expansions, conversion plans, there is a flicker of amusement. The numbers seem inflated, political, unrealistic. They remember the United States from another war. In 1917, American industry had promised much and delivered unevenly. Mobilization came late. Coordination was clumsy. Germany, they believe, has already solved the problem of modern war through discipline, planning and control. The Americans, they conclude, will arrive slowly and awkwardly, if at all. This confidence is not arrogance alone. It is grounded in experience. Germany's early victories appear to confirm everything its officer corps believes about itself. Poland falls in weeks. France collapses in 6. En Noafidwal de Proifata Province of the Bingustarpamet, Thescom 5 station, Refortadesond Tombadam Korsum Xpiand 5 start for is, the Shishan and the Poag Forta Provincem Sont Port of the Mo. German armour moves with speed and precision unmatched in Europe. Tanks operate as instruments of manoeuvre, not attrition. Their crews are well-trained, their machines carefully engineered, their doctrine refined over years of study and experimentation. Germany's war effort rests on the belief that quality outweighs quantity. Tanks are improved constantly. Armour thickens. Guns lengthen. Designs evolve from model to model. Each improvement promises dominance on the battlefield. Each redesign, however, interrupts production. Factories pause. Tooling changes. Output slows. The moment in Detroit matters because the war is already changing, even if few yet understand how. As historian, why the Allies won later argued, the Second World War became a struggle not just of armies but of systems. It was a test of which societies could sustain modern warfare longer than their enemies. Victory would belong to those who could endure loss without collapse. The United States enters the war without illusions of early mastery. American planners know their forces are inexperienced. They also know their strength lies elsewhere. The country possesses vast natural resources, an enormous industrial base, and a workforce capable of rapid adaptation. The challenge is not invention, but organization. The solution is standardization. Rather than chase technical perfection, the US tried Untold crossend voring, with the ways of Ticold Wolder compulsive, tried Untold wild that exode, umbode priesterin tix and thanted voring. Army Ordnance Department chooses reliability, simplicity, and speed. The tank that emerges from this philosophy is the M4 Sherman. It is not the heaviest. It is not the most powerful. It is designed to be built, shipped, repaired, and crewed in unprecedented numbers. German officers expect this choice to prove fatal. In their calculations, an inferior tank, no matter how numerous, cannot survive against superior engineering. They believe American industry will struggle to convert civilian production to military output. Labor disputes will slow factories. Corporate competition will fragment effort. Democratic debate will delay decisions. Adam Tooze in The Wages of Destruction later documents how deeply these assumptions were embedded in German planning. Nazi leadership believed authoritarian control ensured efficiency. They dismissed democratic economies as wasteful and unfocused. This belief shapes strategic decisions long after evidence suggests otherwise. Back in Detroit, Evidence accumulates quietly. Automobile plants retool in weeks, not years. Refrigerator manufacturers learn to weld armor plate. Standardized parts flow between factories, separated by hundreds of miles. The Ordnance Department freezes designs long enough for mass output, resisting the temptation to improve at the cost of delay. The assembly line becomes the weapon. Each station performs one task, repeated endlessly. The process values continuity over innovation. A flaw discovered today is corrected tomorrow without halting production. Losses are anticipated, not feared. By late 1942, Shermans roll onto the docks of North Africa. German troops encounter them for the first time in significant numbers. They are unimpressed at first. The tank is tall. Its armor is thinner than expected. Its gun lacks the penetrating power of newer German designs. Early engagements reinforce German confidence. Then the pattern changes. Destroyed Shermans are replaced almost immediately. Units that should be weakened return to strength within days. New formations appear where none existed before. The numbers begin to accumulate. The official figures tell the story with stark clarity. According to U.S. Army Ordnance Department records, American tank production accelerates at a pace unmatched by any other combatant. By 1943, factories are delivering thousands of tanks annually. By 1944, monthly output reaches levels German planners once believed impossible. German armored units, meanwhile, begin to feel the weight of scarcity. Replacement vehicles arrive slowly. Fuel shortages limit training and movement. Spare parts become precious. Crews are ordered to conserve machines rather than maneuver aggressively. Losses linger. Food becomes the silent contrast. American tanks arrive with supply chains intact. Rations follow them everywhere. Tins of meat, sugar, coffee and chocolate appear in quantities that astonish enemies and allies alike. These supplies are not reserved for officers. They are issued routinely. Predictably, abundance becomes normal. For German soldiers accustomed to rationing and improvisation, this abundance is unsettling. It suggests a depth of resources that cannot be exhausted by battlefield success alone. The Sherman tank, surrounded by fuel trucks and supply depots, becomes a symbol of something larger than itself. The sound of its engine spreads across battlefields, not the roar of a single machine, but the cumulative hum of many. It is the sound of repetition, of replacement, of a system that does not pause to mourn losses. By early 1943, laughter in German staff rooms fades. Reports from Tunisia describe American units recovering from defeats with unexpected speed. The belief that early victories will compensate for long-term imbalance begins to erode. Calculations no longer favor quality alone. What changes is not just tactical assessment, but ideology. Confidence in control gives way to unease about scale. German officers begin to realize that the war is becoming unwinnable, not because of a single mistake, but because of an enemy whose losses mean less than theirs. The transformation is slow and reluctant. It unfolds not in speeches, but in logistics reports and replacement tables. Each month, the gap widens. Back in Detroit, the line continues to move. Snow melts. Spring comes. Summer heat replaces winter cold. The factory does not notice. The rhythm remains unchanged. Tanks roll out one after another, indistinguishable except for serial numbers. The Sherman is no longer just a machine. It is a promise. That losses will be replaced. That effort will be sustained. That time favors those who can afford it. And as the war spreads across continents, that promise will be tested everywhere. By the spring of 1943, the war has shifted its weight south and west. In North Africa, the dust settles unevenly across wrecked vehicles and abandoned positions. Burned-out tanks mark earlier battles, their blackened hulls half buried in sand. Among them sit Shermans, some destroyed, some repaired, some newly arrived, lined up in numbers that unsettle even experienced observers. The desert, once vast and empty, now feels crowded with machines. German officers had expected American armor to appear sporadically, tied to fragile supply lines stretching across the Atlantic. Instead, Shermans arrive steadily, unloaded from ships, driven inland, fueled, armed, and committed with minimal delay. Losses are absorbed without pause. Units that should be exhausted are reinforced. Entire formations seem to regenerate. This reality undermines assumptions formed long before the war began. German doctrine had been shaped by scarcity. Fuel, steel, and skilled labor were always limited. Every vehicle mattered. Every loss required explanation. The American approach appears indifferent to loss, not because it is careless, but because it can afford indifference. As historian, Why the Allies Won emphasizes, the Allies did not seek decisive battles of annihilation in the early years. They sought to exhaust the enemy's capacity to continue. American armor fits this strategy perfectly. It does not need to win elegantly. It only needs to persist. In Sicily and Italy, the terrain changes, but the pattern remains. Shermans grind forward through hills and narrow roads, often under fire from better-positioned German guns. Losses are real. Crews are killed. Tanks burn. Yet the next day, replacements appear. New hulls arrive with fresh paint, engines humming, crews recently trained but adequately prepared. German soldiers notice the food first. American rations spill out of trucks and depots in quantities that defy expectation. Meat in tins, coffee by the sack, bread, sugar, chocolate. These supplies follow the tanks everywhere. They are not occasional windfalls. They are standard issue, routine, predictable. Food becomes a quiet measure of power. It reflects not just logistics but confidence. An army that eats well believes it will be there tomorrow. An army that rations tightly plans for decline. The Sherman's engine sound becomes familiar across the Italian countryside. It echoes off stone villages and hillsides, not as a singular roar, but as a layered hum. One tank, then another, then many. The sound does not promise invincibility. It promises presence. By 1944, the war's industrial imbalance has become impossible to ignore. American factories are operating at a scale unmatched in history. The US deferten bewevi sedv toweld American whalefode. Army Ordnance Department reports that American tank output has reached levels that dwarf German production. Shermans are no longer allocated cautiously. They are issued as needed. German production, meanwhile, suffers from constant disruption. Allied bombing fragments factories. Dispersal protects machinery, but slows output. Design changes continue, driven by the pursuit of technical superiority. Each improvement costs time Germany no longer has. Adam Tooze in The Wages of Destruction documents how late-war German armaments policy becomes trapped by contradiction. The desire for better weapons collides with the need for more weapons. The result is neither achieved fully. The invasion of Normandy marks the moment when American industrial power becomes unmistakable. Shermans roll off landing craft under fire, wade through surf and form up inland. Losses in the first days are heavy. German defences are well prepared, yet within weeks the beaches are crowded with armour. The hedgerows become killing grounds. German tanks and anti-tank guns exploit concealment and range. Shermans are knocked out in alarming numbers. Yet the front does not collapse. American units adapt tactically, adding armour, modifying tanks, coordinating air support. Above all, they replace losses. German officers watching the battle unfold recognize the pattern with growing clarity. Destroying American tanks no longer yields strategic advantage. Each success is temporary. Each gain is erased by renewed pressure. The war of maneuver has become a war of endurance, and endurance favors the side with deeper reserves. Food continues to symbolize this reality. Captured American depots overflow with supplies. German soldiers, often underfed by this stage of the war, cannot ignore the contrast. Abundance is no longer an abstraction. It is tangible, edible, undeniable. The Sherman itself evolves modestly, but not radically. Its gun improves, its armor thickens slightly. The changes are incremental, carefully balanced against production speed. The tank remains easy to maintain, easy to crew, easy to ship. It remains, above all, available. This availability reshapes perception. German soldiers no longer view American tanks as individual threats. They view them as a constant environment, like weather, something to endure rather than defeat permanently. By late 1944, this realization spreads beyond the battlefield. German strategic planning acknowledges limits previously denied. Fuel shortages cripple movement. Replacement crews are rushed forward with minimal training. Entire units exist only on paper. In the Pacific, The same industrial logic unfolds across vast distances. Shermans arrive on islands thousands of miles from American shores, supported by fleets and supply chains that defy pre-war assumptions. Japanese defenders, accustomed to fighting with limited resources, encounter an enemy whose material strength seems inexhaustible. The symbolism of food persists. American rations sustain operations in jungles, on beaches, and in remote outposts. They reflect a system capable of feeding its soldiers reliably, even at the edge of the world. The Sherman tank becomes an expression of this system. Not perfect, not invulnerable, but persistent. It embodies a philosophy that values continuity over brilliance, replacement over preservation. German officers who once laughed now calculate losses with a different tone. The war is no longer about winning decisively. It is about delaying the inevitable. The ideological certainty that discipline and control guarantee victory dissolves under the pressure of numbers. Factories in the United States continue their rhythm. Winter turns to spring, spring to summer. The assembly lines do not pause. Women and men work shifts that blur into one another. The sound of presses becomes background noise to a society fully mobilized. The Sherman's engine sound, heard across continents, carries meaning beyond combat. It signals a new kind of warfare, one where democracy organizes itself into an engine of sustained power. As 1945 approaches, the question is no longer whether American production can be matched. It cannot. The question becomes how quickly the imbalance will end the war. And in that imbalance, German officers find the answer they once dismissed. By the winter of 1944, the war has lost its illusions. Snow settles over shattered towns and frozen fields across Western Europe. Burned vehicles line roads that once carried advances measured in kilometers per day. Now movement is cautious, fuel limited, and constrained by realities no amount of discipline can overcome. German armored units still fight, still kill, still resist, but they do so with an awareness that was absent only 2 years earlier. They are no longer asking how to win. They are calculating how long they can last. American armor continues to arrive. Shermans cross rivers on hastily built bridges, their tracks clanking against frozen planks. They roll through villages reduced to rubble, their silhouettes instantly recognizable. The tank is everywhere now, not as a marvel, but as a certainty. When one is lost, another replaces it. When a unit is shattered, it is rebuilt. The rhythm established in Detroit echoes here, translated into motion and sound. German officers observe this repetition with a clarity that borders on bitterness. The superiority of individual machines no longer matters. Late-war German tanks are formidable, thickly armored, heavily armed, but they appear too rarely, too late, and in too small numbers to alter the outcome. Each loss is irreplaceable. Each retreat leaves behind equipment that cannot be recovered. The evidence is unmistakable. By 1944-1945, American industrial output has reached levels without historical precedent. US 20 German port capacities nuacles. Army Ordnance Department figures show that tank losses at the front are offset almost immediately by new deliveries. Entire armored divisions rotate, refit, and return to combat. The system absorbs damage without fracture. German production, by contrast, collapses under strain. Allied bombing disrupts transportation networks. Fuel shortages immobilize units before they ever reach the battlefield. Skilled labor is irreplaceable. Factories disperse, slowing output further. The pursuit of technical perfection continues, but perfection without volume proves meaningless. Adam Tooze's analysis in The Wages of Destruction captures the contradiction at the heart of the German war economy, a belief in control that could not overcome material limits. The Nazi system, rigid and ideologically constrained, lacked the flexibility to shift fully toward mass production until it was too late. By the time reforms were attempted, the imbalance was irreversible. Food remains the quiet, recurring symbol of this imbalance. American supply depots overflow even in the final months of the war. Rations are distributed with regularity. Coffee, meat, sugar, and bread sustain soldiers who know they will be fed tomorrow. German troops, increasingly undernourished, recognize what this abundance represents. Not indulgence, but stability. The Sherman's engine sound carries through the late war like a mechanical heartbeat. It is steady, predictable. It does not promise glory. It promises continuation. The tank's presence signals that the system behind it is still functioning, still producing, still capable of applying pressure without pause. As Allied forces cross the Rhine, the last geographic barrier to Germany's heartland, the industrial contest reaches its conclusion. Shermans roll forward, not as symbols of conquest, but as instruments of inevitability. Resistance continues, but belief has eroded. The war's end is no longer a matter of if, but when. In the Pacific, the same logic reaches its own conclusion. Shermans support landings and advances across islands that once seemed unreachable. Japanese defenders, isolated and undersupplied, encounter an enemy whose material strength never appears to diminish. The distances involved only deepen the impression. If American tanks can arrive here, they can arrive anywhere. The transformation is complete. German officers who once laughed at American production figures now understand what those numbers meant. They represented not exaggeration, but intent. Not propaganda, but capacity. The laughter fades into post-war testimony and private reflection. When the war ends, the factories slow. The presses fall silent. The lines that once produced tanks return to civilian life. Automobiles replace armor. Refrigerators replace ammunition. The same system that sustained war redirects itself toward peace. The Sherman remains behind in photographs and memories, not as the greatest weapon of the conflict, but as one of its most revealing. It embodied a philosophy that accepted imperfection in exchange for continuity, that valued replacement over preservation, that trusted systems more than symbols. Richard Overy's conclusion in Why the Allies Won echoes through this outcome. Modern war is decided by societies, not just armies, by their ability to mobilize, sustain, and endure. The larger truth emerges quietly from the wreckage. Freedom, when organized, can generate abundance without exhaustion. Democracy, when threatened, can transform compromise into coordination. The Sherman tank, rolling endlessly across continents, carried that truth in steel and sound. German officers laughed once, believing war could be mastered through brilliance alone. They stopped laughing when American tanks appeared on every front, not as miracles but as guarantees. In that realization lay the final defeat of an ideology that mistook scarcity for strength. History records the victory in dates and documents, but it is also remembered in simpler terms, in the steady arrival of machines that could be lost without despair and replaced without delay. That was the sound of democracy at war.